They thought I wouldn't notice. They've always thought that in their own loving, condescending way. The forgotten birthdays that were only remembered a week late with a text message. The sudden, urgent phone calls that, by some cosmic coincidence, always materialized the day a large bill was due. The way my daughter's husband, Liam, would flash that charming, predatory smile whenever he'd say something like, "We've got to look after her. She won't be around forever." Oh, I noticed it all. I simply filed it away, another piece of data in a long and increasingly depressing trend line. I said nothing, until the day I saw the charge for £20,000 on my credit card. Spent at a 5-star resort in the Maldives, on spa packages and designer clothes, all in my name, just days before my 70th birthday. And while they were laughing and toasting to their free holiday, I made a call. A quiet call. A precise, legal, and utterly final call. They didn't know the house was still in my name. They didn't know I'd never finalized the transfer of the deed. A week later, they would come home to find a foreclosure notice on their door. The lock's already changed. You should have heard the sound she made. You've never heard anything like it. The soft, hazy light of a Surrey morning was filtering through the blinds of my kitchen, illuminating the lazy spirals of steam rising from my cup of Earl Grey. 70 years of life had taught me that the quietest moments are often the ominous hush before the storm. That Tuesday morning, however, everything felt perfectly ordinary in my little Oakhaven sanctuary. My house, a modest but immaculate semi-detached I'd bought with my own retirement funds, had been my haven for the last 20 years. Every corner reflected the order I had cultivated after a lifetime working as a financial analyst in the city, a world where numbers didn't lie and patterns revealed truths that words often tried to hide. My bills were organized by their due date on my mahogany desk, my personal ledgers updated to the last penny. My world made sense because I made damn sure it did. I settled into my favorite armchair, the worn leather sighing softly, and opened my laptop. It was a morning ritual as familiar as brewing my tea. Checking my accounts every Tuesday and Friday was a habit that had saved more than one of my clients from financial ruin during my working years. The numbers appeared on the screen with their usual digital crispness, but something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. My savings account showed the expected balance. My current account was fine, but my credit card, I froze, the porcelain cup halfway to my lips. £20,000. The full limit spent. I refreshed the page, a flicker of hope that it was a server error, a digital ghost in the machine. The numbers remained stubborn and stark. With fingers that had begun to tremble, I clicked on the transaction history. The trail was meticulous and devastating. The Azure Sanctuary, Maldives. A 5-star restaurant with a French name I couldn't pronounce. A boutique on Bond Street. The spending was concentrated over the last 10 days, from places I recognized with a sickening lurch from my daughter Chloe's recent Instagram posts. I leaned back in my chair, the betrayal settling in my chest like a block of ice. It wasn't just the money, though for a pensioner, it was a sum that made my breath catch. It was the sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it. The absolute certainty that I either wouldn't notice or worse, that I wouldn't care. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a notification. Instagram. A new photo from Chloe. There she was, with Liam, on what looked like a private sundeck overlooking an impossibly turquoise ocean. Champagne flutes were raised, their smiles brilliant and carefree. Chloe was wearing a slinky sunset orange dress that clung to her in a way that was both stunning and, under the circumstances, obscene. It was a dress that screamed expense, a whisper of fabric that likely cost more than my monthly food budget. Liam, his arm draped possessively around her, had that smug, sun-kissed grin I'd come to despise. The caption read, "Just what the doctor ordered. #blessed, #family time, #much needed break." Family time. Without me. Using my money for a break they felt they deserved. I closed the app without liking or commenting, something I would normally have done without a second thought. For years, I had been the ever-supportive mother and grandmother, the reliable cheerleader for their happiness, even as they gently but firmly excluded me from it. This morning, however, something had fundamentally shifted in the emotional mathematics of our relationship that I spent the next hour dissecting every transaction, taking screenshots, organizing the data with the same cold precision I'd once applied to a client's portfolio. Each purchase told a story. The 400-pound dinner on day 1. The 800-pound spa day on day 3. The 1,200-pound shopping spree in boutiques whose names were synonymous with a life I'd only read about in magazines. Liam had even used my card to buy a bespoke suit from a tailor on Seville Row, a place so far out of his normal salary league it was laughable. My phone rang, shattering the tense silence. It was Beatrice. Of course, it was B. She asked if I was coming for our weekly lunch or if I planned on starving to death in my perfectly tidy house. Her voice as brusque and loving as it had been for the 40 years of our friendship. I told her I was on my way, surprised at how steady my own voice sounded. The drive to the Gilded Scone, our favorite local tea room, was only 5 minutes, but it gave me time to process. This wasn't the first time Chloe had taken liberties. It had been small things for years, using my Amazon Prime account without asking, borrowing money that was seldom repaid, assuming I would look after my grandson, Leo, whenever it suited them. But this was different. This was a calculated, large-scale heist, executed with the confidence of someone who believed there would be no consequences. B was already at our usual table, scrutinizing the menu as if she didn't have it memorized. At 71, my best friend still wore her silver hair in a sharp, elegant bob and sported a slash of crimson lipstick that dared the world to challenge her. She was everything I was not. Vocal, dramatic, and perfectly willing to cause a scene if a situation warranted it. She took one look at my face as I sat down and her own expression sharpened. She told me I looked like I'd seen a ghost, and asked what on earth had happened. I told her everything as she ordered an extra sweet iced tea, and I ordered a salad I knew I wouldn't be able to finish. Bea listened without interrupting, a rare feat for her, but I watched her expression shift from surprise to indignation, and finally to a fierce, protective maternal fury that I recognized all too well. That girl, she said finally, her voice low and dangerous, has gone completely off the rails. I reminded her that Chloe was 38, a grown woman. Bea retorted that was precisely her point. She leaned forward, her voice dropping but its intensity rising. Eleanor, you have to do something. This can't go on. I knew she was right. What are you going to do? It was the question I had been avoiding since the numbers first glared at me from the screen. For years, I had managed Chloe's dramas with the same strategy. Absorb the impact, minimize the damage, keep the peace. It had worked when it was small transgressions, but this was a financial car bomb, and the flagrant carelessness of it suggested Chloe no longer saw any boundaries at all. I admitted I didn't know yet. Bea's eyes, sharp and knowing, narrowed. She told me I'd better figure it out, and fast. Then she delivered the final, killing blow. She asked if I knew what Liam had said to her last week when she'd bumped into him in Waitrose. I shook my head, a sense of dread coiling in my stomach. He told her they were helping to keep my house payments up to date, as if they were doing me a favor by living in the very house I'd co-signed the mortgage on. He'd actually said, and Bea used air quotes dripping with sarcasm, that they were helping to keep me relevant, giving me a purpose. Purpose. As if being their personal, walking cash machine was the only value I had left. I felt something shift inside me, a deep, tectonic grinding of plates before an earthquake. For months, I had justified co-signing that mortgage as an investment in my family's future. Leo would have stability. Chloe would finally learn financial responsibility. Liam, well, I had hoped Liam would grow up. Instead, I had created a monster of dependency and entitlement. I asked Bea if they were away for the whole week. According to Instagram, yes, she confirmed, then studied me with those perceptive eyes that had seen through my evasions for decades. Eleanor Holloway, are you plotting something? I'm considering my options, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Bea grinned, a flash of bright red lipstick and satisfaction. Well, it's about bloody time. We finished our lunch by talking about other things. The new vicar at St. Jude's, the council's dreadful plans for the local park, the arrangements for my upcoming birthday, but my mind was elsewhere. It was calculating, planning, a dormant part of my brain whirring back to life. Back in the sanctuary of my home, I made the call. Alice Sharma had been my informal mentee for years, a brilliant young woman from the neighborhood who'd gone to law school on a scholarship I'd quietly helped fund. Now, at 30, she was a junior partner at a respectable London firm and owed me more favors than either of us had ever kept count of. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and bright, asking how I was. I told her I needed legal advice. The warmth in her tone didn't vanish, but it was immediately underpinned by a sharp, professional focus. She asked if everything was all right. I replied that it depended entirely on one's definition of all right, and asked if she could come over that evening. I needed to talk about cosign mortgages and credit card fraud. There was a brief, knowing pause. Then she asked if this was about Chloe. Of course, she knew. She'd been observing my family's dynamics for years, a quiet spectator probably seeing patterns I had been too close, or too willfully blind, to acknowledge. I confirmed it was, and she promised to be there at 7. I spent the rest of the afternoon assembling a war chest of documents. The mortgage papers, bank statements, the damning history of my credit card transactions, records of every temporary loan that Chloe had never repaid. It was a devastating pattern of financial exploitation stretching back years, culminating in this final, casual act of betrayal. At 7 o'clock sharp, Alice knocked on my door. She was still in her work attire, a razor-sharp navy trouser suit that probably cost a fortune, but she'd swapped her severe court shoes for a pair of trendy white trainers, a detail I'd always loved about her. Practicality to the very end. She set her leather briefcase on my dining room table, now cleared for battle, and told me to show her everything. I laid out the numbers, the whole sordid history, the complete pattern of abusive financial behavior I had been justifying as helping family. Alice worked in silence for the better part of an hour, her sharp, intelligent eyes scanning document after document. She was the picture of modern professionalism, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek knot, a single, elegant silver bracelet on her wrist. She occasionally asked a technical question, her pen scratching across a legal pad, her fingers flying across her laptop as she checked statutes online. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, her expression grim. She explained that legally, I was in a vulnerable position because of the co-signature. But, she added, her eyes meeting mine, I also had options. More options than I probably realized. I asked her what they were. She laid them out with chilling clarity. I could revoke my status as a co-signer if I could prove it had become an unsustainable financial burden. The unauthorized use of my credit card would certainly qualify. I could also freeze all joint accounts and require both parties to be present for any future transactions. Alice leaned forward, her voice low and serious. She needed me to understand, though, that if I did this, if I truly went down this path, there would be consequences. I told her, my voice quiet but firm, that my relationship with Chloe was already broken. I just hadn't been willing to admit it until now. Alice held my gaze for a long moment, assessing my resolve. She asked if I was sure I wanted to proceed. I looked out of my window at the neat rows of houses, at the neighborhood I had chosen so carefully for my retirement. I thought of the years I had spent putting everyone else's needs before my own, justifying every sacrifice as an investment in family love. But real love, I was beginning to realize, doesn't flourish in the soil of exploitation. I was sure. I asked her what we needed to do. Alice smiled, not with joy, but with a profound, professional respect. She told me we were going to protect my assets, all of them, and we were going to make sure that Chloe and Liam understood exactly what they had lost. While Alice began drafting the preliminary documents, I went upstairs to my bedroom and pulled out the old wooden box where I kept family photos. I found one of Chloe at 20, fresh-faced and radiant at her university graduation. Her arms wrapped around me in my office the day I'd helped her land her first job. Her eyes shone with genuine gratitude and love. That young woman had somehow morphed into someone who could steal £20,000 from me without a second thought. But maybe, just maybe, the consequences of her actions would help her find her way back to the person she used to be. And if not, well, I had learned something crucial that morning while staring at those merciless numbers on my screen. Sometimes, the most powerful love is the one that knows when to say no. The plan began to unfurl, but that night, I barely slept. Alice's words echoed in the quiet darkness of my bedroom. There will be consequences. Of course there would be. But as I lay awake, watching the red digital numbers of my alarm clock tick slowly towards dawn, I realized the consequences had already begun years ago. I had simply been too blind, or perhaps too afraid, to see them. At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to my study. The small room, usually a place of quiet reading and correspondence, became my command center. I pulled out every file box where I kept the last decade's worth of family documents. Loan agreements I had co-signed, receipts for extravagant gifts that were never reciprocated, emails where Liam had assured me the mortgage payments would always be on time, the original correspondence with the bank when they'd first applied for the loan. Each document told a piece of the story. Together, they formed a devastating tapestry of systematic financial manipulation. The original mortgage had been for £280,000. I had put down the £60,000 deposit myself, practically my entire life savings at the time, because Chloe had wept, explaining how without my help, my grandson Leo would grow up in a cramped, unsuitable flat in a dangerous neighborhood. Liam had been present during that tear-soaked conversation, nodding gravely as he spoke of investing in the family's future. Now, reviewing the paperwork with the cold eyes of a financial analyst instead of a doting mother, I saw the crimson flags I had willfully ignored. Their combined income barely qualified them for half the loan amount. Their credit histories were riddled with gaps and late payments that should have been alarming. The bank had only approved the loan because I, with my impeccable credit and substantial assets, had been willing to co-sign, making the whole venture seem safe. For the bank, it was a sound investment. For me, it had been a sentence of financial servitude, AT8. Alice arrived with coffee and croissants from the French bakery we both loved. She had changed out of her suit and into jeans and a casual silk blouse, but she carried a briefcase that looked all business. She asked how I was feeling this morning as she settled at my dining room table, which now resembled the desk of a forensic accountant. Like an idiot, I admitted. How did I not see this sooner? Alice replied kindly that it was because I loved my daughter, and because they were very, very good at what they did. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. She'd been doing some digging. Liam, she informed me, had done this before. The blood in my veins turned to ice. She explained that his first wife had filed a lawsuit for financial fraud during their divorce. It was dismissed because she couldn't prove malicious intent, but the pattern was eerily similar. Joint credit cards emptied, savings accounts drained, always with plausible excuses about family emergencies or once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunities. Nausea rose in my throat. I asked if Chloe knew about this. Alice wasn't sure, but she said that honestly it didn't matter. Chloe was a grown woman who had chosen to participate in this. The fact they used my credit card without permission, without so much as a phone call, was not an accident or a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. Alice was right. For years, I had made excuses for Chloe, treating her as if she were a hapless victim of Liam's bad influence. But the truth was simpler and far more painful. My daughter had chosen this. I asked what my options were. Alice listed them. We could report the credit card fraud to the police and the card company. We could begin proceedings to have my name removed as co-signer on the mortgage, based on a breach of their agreed-upon obligations. We could freeze any future access to my accounts. Alice paused, looking at me carefully. Or, she said, we could do all of it at once. Send a very clear message. I asked how long it would take. The fraud report was immediate. Removing the co-signature, perhaps 2 weeks if there were no complications. The bank would likely require Liam and Chloe to requalify for the loan on their own, which, Alice added, consulting her notes, was highly improbable based on what she'd seen of their finances. That meant, she clarified, that if I proceeded, there was a high probability they would lose the house. The words hung in the air between us. For years, that house had represented stability for Leo, a home for my family. But it had also represented my financial vulnerability, my inability to say no, my willingness to be exploited in the name of love. Leo, I murmured, his face flashing in my mind. Alice, ever practical, had already thought of that. He was a minor. If his parents lost the house, he had a legal right to request to live with another family member. With me, for example, the idea struck me like a bolt of lightning. Leo living here with me, away from the financial toxicity of his parents, in an environment where money was respected instead of stolen, where words had meaning. Would he even want that? I didn't know. But it was worth considering. We spent the next 3 hours preparing the documents. Alice was meticulous, explaining every form, every legal implication. I signed the credit card fraud complaint. I initiated the process to remove my co-signature from the mortgage. I authorized Alice to freeze all existing joint accounts. Each signature felt like an act of liberation. I asked when the bank would be notified. Tomorrow, she said. They would be given 30 days to qualify for the loan independently or find another cosigner. And if they couldn't, then foreclosure proceedings would begin automatically. I leaned back in my chair, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Control. For the first time in decades, I was making the decisions about my own money, my own future. Alice packed the documents back into her briefcase and asked if I was prepared for what was coming. Chloe would be furious. Liam would try to manipulate me. They would say horrible things. I thought about the question. For years, I had avoided conflict at all costs, sacrificing my own dignity and financial resources to keep the family peace. I had lived in a state of constant low-grade anxiety about what Chloe thought of me, whether I was doing enough, whether I was a good mother. But that anxiety had been a one-way street. Chloe clearly didn't care what I thought of her, or she wouldn't have stolen £20,000 for a luxury holiday. I told Alice, my voice steady, that I could no longer be the only person in this family who cared about other people's feelings. She smiled, a grin of genuine admiration. That seems fair. After Alice left, I called Beatrice. She picked up immediately, her voice sharp. Have you done something yet? She demanded without preamble. I told her I had. Thank God. She breathed. What did you do? I relayed the morning's events, the documents, Alice, the impending timeline. Beatrice listened in uncharacteristic silence. When I finished, I asked if she was still there. I'm here, she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. I'm just proud of you, Eleanor. The simple sincerity of those words broke my heart in the most beautiful way. How long had it been since someone had been proud of me for taking care of myself, instead of for sacrificing myself for others? This is going to be awful, I whispered. Probably she agreed. But you know what? You've already been living the awful version where they treat you like their personal cash machine. At least this awful version has an ending. That afternoon, I worked in my garden, something I always did when I needed to think. I pulled weeds with a vengeance, pruned the rose bushes, and watered the plants that had been struggling in the summer heat. There was something deeply satisfying about tending to things that actually appreciated the attention. As my hands worked the soil, I thought about Leo. My grandson had been watching this dysfunction for years, learning that love was demonstrated through financial sacrifice, that family meant taking without giving. What kind of man would he become if this was his primary model? Maybe, just maybe, showing him there was another way, that real love required mutual respect, that family meant shared responsibility, would be the most valuable gift I could ever give him. The sun was setting when I finished in the garden. I sat on my back porch with a glass of iced tea, watching the shadows lengthen across the lawn. Tomorrow, the bank would receive Alice's documents. In 30 days, Chloe and Liam would have to face the consequences of their actions. For the first time in years, the future felt like something I was creating, rather than something that was simply happening to me. My phone buzzed with another Instagram notification. This time, I didn't ignore it. It was a photo of Chloe and Liam at what looked like an airport, designer suitcases at their feet, radiant smiles aimed at the camera. The caption read, "Back to reality. Perfect holiday over, back home. #blessed." It was 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. 3 days had passed since Alice had sent the documents to the bank. 3 days of an eerie calm that felt like the silence before a devastating storm. I poured myself a cup of tea and settled into my favorite armchair by the front window. From here, I had a clear view of their driveway, my former investment, my £60,000 mistake. In an hour, maybe 2, they would be home, unloading suitcases filled with memories bought with my stolen money. But this time, I wouldn't be waiting with anxious questions about their trip or offers to help with their luggage. This time, I had my own agenda. At 5:30, Liam's silver BMW, financed, of course, with a loan I had co-signed 2 years prior, pulled into their drive. I watched them unload bag after bag, laughing about something Liam had said. Chloe was wearing an expensive-looking sundress, and Liam sported a tan that spoke of lazy days under a tropical sun. They looked happy, relaxed, and utterly oblivious to the fact that their world was about to collapse. Leo, my grandson, came running out of the house to help with the bags. He had grown so much in the last year that it sometimes startled me. At 17, he had his stepfather's height, but retained a gentleness in his face that reminded me of Chloe when she was a little girl. He hugged his mum briefly before hefting 2 large suitcases towards the house. He was the one I worried about most in all of this. Leo hadn't chosen to have parents who stole and manipulated. He hadn't asked to grow up in a house built on financial lies. But he was going to pay the consequences all the same. I waited an hour. Long enough for them to settle in, to start unpacking, to feel secure in their normal routine. Then, I walked across the street and rang their doorbell. Chloe opened it with a genuine smile, the first I'd seen in months. "Mom, how did you know we were just back?" she said, pulling me into a hug that felt both warm and utterly fraudulent. "We were just about to call you. We have so much to tell you about the trip." "I'm sure," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Can we talk?" "Of course, come in. Come in. Liam's just having a shower, but he'll be down in a minute. Do you want to see the pictures?" The resort was incredible, and the beach, Chloe chattered on as she led me into the living room. The house was immaculate, of course. Chloe had inherited my obsession with order, if not my financial discipline. Expensive furniture in perfectly coordinated spaces, art on the walls that cost more than I had earned in a month when I was young. All of it financed with money they didn't have. "Chloe," I interrupted gently, "we need to talk about something important." Something in my tone must have alerted her, because her smile faltered slightly. "Is everything okay? You look serious." Is Leo home? "He's in his room." "Why?" "Because I'd rather he heard this as well." Now Chloe looked genuinely concerned. "Mom, you're scaring me. What is it?" "Leo," I called up the stairs. "Can you come down for a moment, please?" Liam appeared on the landing at the same time as Leo, his hair still damp from the shower, wearing expensive beach shorts and a white linen shirt. When he saw me, his smile was different from Chloe's. More calculated, more careful. "Eleanor," he said, coming down to give me a kiss on the cheek that smelled of expensive sun lotion. "How are you? Hope there wasn't any trouble while we were away." The cynicism of the question was almost breathtaking. Trouble? Like finding 20,000 pounds stolen from my credit card? Like discovering the man I called my son-in-law had been mocking me at the local supermarket? Like realizing I had raised a daughter who could steal from me without blinking? "Sit down," I said simply. Leo perched on the edge of the sofa, looking between the adults with the keen intuition teenagers have for familial tension. Chloe sat next to him, still smiling, but with a line of worry appearing between her eyebrows. Liam remained standing, leaning against the fireplace in a pose he probably thought looked casual and confident. I took out the papers I had brought, not all of them, just the most important ones, and placed them on the coffee table. On Monday morning, I began, my voice perfectly calm. I discovered that my credit card had been maxed out. 20,000 pounds, spent over 10 days on hotels, restaurants, shops. Chloe blinked. Liam went very still. At first, I thought perhaps it was fraud. But then I checked the dates and locations, and they matched your Instagram posts perfectly. "Mom," Chloe started, but I held up a hand that I haven't finished. I looked directly at Liam. "You used my credit card without my permission to fund a luxury holiday. You didn't ask me. You didn't tell me. You simply took my money and left." Liam straightened his shoulders, and I saw the shift in his posture from feigned casualness to something more defensive. "Eleanor, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding. I have the statements. I have the screenshots. I have documentation of every single transaction." I kept my voice completely level. "What you did is called credit card fraud." Chloe had gone pale. We thought," I mean, you've always helped us before. You thought what, exactly? That because I have helped my family in the past, you now had the right to steal from me? It's not stealing. Chloe's voice rose an octave. We're family, and it's not like you can't afford it. Leo sank deeper into the sofa, clearly uncomfortable. Liam stepped forward. Eleanor, I think you're overreacting. Yes, perhaps we should have called first, but you know we always pay you back. When? The question came out sharper than I'd intended. When, exactly, have you ever paid back a loan in full? Liam opened his mouth, then closed it. Chloe was staring at her hands. The £10,000 loan for Chloe's car 3 years ago? You paid back 500 and then stopped. The £8,000 loan for medical emergencies 2 years ago? 0 payments. The $3,000 for Liam's investment opportunity last year? Also 0 payments. With each number, the room grew quieter. And now this, £20,000, taken without asking. I leaned forward slightly. So when you say you always pay me back, what exactly are you talking about? Liam tried to regain control of the situation. Look, Eleanor, I know you're upset, and I understand why, but we're family. Families help each other. You help us, we help you. We keep this house updated with our mortgage payments. You keep it updated? I repeated his words slowly. Liam, this house you live in. Who put down the deposit? You did, but who co-signed the loan? You did, but that's what I mean. It's a partnership. A partnership. I stood up, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. Liam, do you know what Beatrice told me you said to her in Waitrose last week? His face lost some of its color. The walk back to my own house was both the longest and shortest of my life. My steps felt measured, deliberate, as the sound of raised voices faded behind me. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth without apologizing for it, without softening the edges to make others more comfortable with their own bad behavior. Once inside my own four walls, I poured a glass of water with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. What I had just done was irreversible. I had crossed a line I had been tiptoeing around for decades, and on the other side of that line was a version of myself I didn't fully recognize. A woman who stood up for herself. My phone started ringing within 20 minutes. Chloe. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Chloe. Voicemail. On the third try, I answered. Mom, you have to stop this. Her voice was thick with tears, but there was something else there. Genuine panic. We just spoke to the bank. They said we have to qualify for the full loan ourselves, or her voice broke, or they're going to start foreclosure proceedings. I know. I said simply, you don't understand. We can't qualify for £280,000 on our own. Our income isn't high enough. I know. There was a long pause. When Chloe spoke again, her voice had that sharp, desperate quality I remembered from her childhood tantrums. What do you want? Money? An apology? What do we have to do to fix this? The question revealed so much about how she saw the world. To Chloe, this was just a problem to be fixed with the right words or the right amount of drama. She didn't understand that she had broken something fundamental and irreparable. Chloe, I said carefully, there is nothing you can do to fix this. You stole from me. You violated my trust. And then, when I confronted you, you told me I was being dramatic. It was Liam who said that, not me. But you didn't correct him. You stood there while he tried to minimize what you had both done. I heard heavy breathing on the other end of the line. Please, Mom. Please don't do this. Think about Leo. Where is he going to live? And there it was, using my grandson as an emotional shield, just as she had for years whenever she faced consequences for her actions. Leo can live with me, I said. My house has a spare room. You can't just take my son. I'm not taking him. I'm offering him stability. The call ended with an abrupt click. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Liam. Eleanor. His voice had that controlled, level quality he used when he was trying to be persuasive rather than confrontational. I think there was a huge misunderstanding tonight. There was no misunderstanding. Look, I know Chloe can be dramatic, and maybe I didn't handle the situation in the best way. But you have to understand the position this puts us in. I understand the position this puts you in perfectly, Liam. It puts you in the position of facing the consequences of your actions. Eleanor, let's be practical here. If we lose this house, we all lose. You lose your investment. Liam, I interrupted. I lost my investment a long time ago. I have poured over £100,000 into this family in the last 5 years and never seen a penny of it back. At least now I can stop the bleeding. But what about Leo? Are you really going to destroy a child's stability just to make a point? The manipulation was so transparent I almost admired his audacity. Leo will have stability with me. In a house that isn't built on financial lies. You can't just decide he's going to live with you. He can decide for himself. He's 17. He's old enough to have a say in where he lives. Liam hung up without another word. That evening, as I tried to read in my living room, I saw lights flicking on and off in the house opposite, shadows moving behind the windows in ways that suggested intense conversations, possibly arguments. At 10 o'clock, Liam's BMW screeched out of the driveway. At 11, there was a soft knock on my door. It was Leo, a school rucksack slung over his shoulder, an expression on his face that was half apology, half determination. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. Of course. I opened the door wider, noticing him glance over his shoulder at his own house before stepping inside. He sat on my sofa, still wearing his rucksack as if unsure if he was staying. "I heard the phone calls," he said finally. "Well, their side of them, anyway. They're scared." He adjusted the straps on his bag. "I've never seen them like this before. Usually when there's money trouble, they just assume you'll fix it somehow. And how do you feel about it?" Leo was silent for a long moment, looking down at his hands, confused. I know what they did was wrong. Using your credit card without asking. That's just wrong, no matter how they justify it." He paused, wrestling with something. "But also, this is my home. The only home I really remember. And I know Mum and Liam can be a lot, but they're my family." I felt my heart break a little for him. This wasn't his mess, but he was going to live with the fallout anyway. "Leo," I said gently, "you don't have to pick sides in this. What's happening between the adults is not your responsibility. But I do have to choose, don't I? If they lose the house, where would I sleep tonight if not here? Probably on the sofa." Mum and Liam are having a lot of intense conversations. The kind that involve a lot of blaming each other and crying. I looked at this young man who had grown up in the midst of so much emotional and financial chaos and wondered how he had managed to keep his compassion intact. "You can stay tonight," I offered. "Your guest room is always available. Won't you get in trouble with them for that?" "Leo, I'm already in all the trouble possible with them. One more night isn't going to change anything." He saw something in my face that made him relax slightly. He shrugged off his rucksack. "Gran," he said, using a term he hadn't used in years, "are they really going to lose the house?" "I don't know. It depends if they can find another way to finance the loan. And if they can't, then yes, they probably will." He nodded slowly, processing this. "And are you going to be okay?" The question surprised me. When was the last time anyone in my family had asked if I was going to be okay? "I'm going to be more than okay," I told him, and I realized it was true. For the first time in years, I'm going to be completely and utterly okay.